April 9th, 1940. Norway, land of fjords, mountains, and silence. The kind of silence that conceals a storm. For centuries, this Scandinavian nation had thrived in relative peace, its neutrality respected by the powers of Europe. But in the spring of 1940, as the world burned in the fires of war, Norway was dragged into a conflict it neither sought nor expected. Germany, under Hitler's ruthless command, had launched its bid for European domination. France and Britain had declared war after the invasion of Poland, but as Germany turned westward, it faced a problem: resources. Sweden's iron ore, critical for producing steel, flowed to Germany through Norway's ice-free ports like Narvik. Control over Norway's coastline meant controlling this lifeline and dominating the North Sea. The Nazis had their solution. They called it Operation Weserübung. It was a plan as audacious as it was swift. The goal? Invade and occupy Norway before the Allies could react. The stakes were high, for both sides. The invasion began under the cover of darkness. German ships slipped into Norwegian waters, shadowed by aircraft from the Luftwaffe. In a coordinated assault, 6 key cities were targeted: Oslo, Bergen, Trondheim, Stavanger, Kristiansand, and Narvik. Each location had strategic importance: airfields, ports, and vital infrastructure. For the Norwegian people, the first signs of war were subtle: the low thrum of engines on the horizon, the uneasy chatter in fishing villages, the hurried movements of soldiers at coastal defences. Then, the silence broke. In Oslo, the capital, the tension reached a boiling point. German paratroopers descended near the city's airfield at Fornebu, swiftly overwhelming Norwegian defenders. The airport fell in hours, giving the invaders a critical foothold. But the real prize was the city itself, along with its government and, most importantly, its king. When the Germans issued their ultimatum, surrender or face destruction, King Haakon VII made a decision that would define Norway's resistance. He refused. The king and his government fled Oslo, retreating into the rugged wilderness of the interior. It was a symbolic act, a declaration to the world that Norway would not go quietly into occupation. Not everyone escaped Oslo. Norwegian soldiers, vastly outnumbered and under-equipped, fought bravely to delay the Germans. One small skirmish stands out: the Battle of Midskogen Farm. German forces, hunting for the king, encountered a ragtag group of Norwegian soldiers and civilians. Armed with little more than hunting rifles and a fierce determination, these defenders repelled the invaders. It wasn't a decisive victory, but it was enough to buy time for the government to escape. Meanwhile, far to the north, a different kind of battle was brewing. The port of Narvik, buried deep in the Arctic Circle, became the focal point of the campaign. Narvik was no ordinary town. It was the lifeblood of Germany's war effort, the conduit through which Swedish iron ore flowed. If the Allies could cut off Narvik, they could cripple Germany's steel production. British, French, and Polish forces rushed to reinforce Norwegian troops in the region. But fighting in Narvik was unlike anything most soldiers had ever experienced. The mountains were steep and snow-covered. The cold bit through even the thickest uniforms, and the enemy was as relentless as the terrain. The battles around Narvik became a test of endurance and ingenuity. Allied and Norwegian forces used skis to traverse the rugged landscape, launching hit-and-run attacks on German positions. These ski troops, often local volunteers familiar with the harsh terrain, became the Allies' greatest asset. But the Germans didn't make it easy. They fortified their positions, using the natural defences of the fjords to their advantage. One particularly daring operation saw Norwegian and British forces ambushing a German supply convoy in a narrow mountain pass. The sound of gunfire echoed through the cliffs as the ambushers struck quickly and melted into the snowy wilderness. For a moment, it seemed the Allies might hold Narvik, but the Luftwaffe was never far away, German bombers harried Allied convoys, destroying supply lines and crippling morale. And then there were the U-boats, lurking beneath the icy waters of the North Sea, picking off British ships one by one. The Allies knew they were fighting a losing battle. Back in the south, one of the most dramatic moments of the campaign unfolded in Oslofjord. The German cruiser Blücher attempted to force its way through to Oslo, carrying troops meant to seize the government. But it never reached its target. Norwegian coastal defences, manned by a skeleton crew at the Oscarsborg fortress, opened fire with ancient cannons. Miraculously, their aim was true. A shell struck the Blücher, igniting its ammunition stores. The explosion lit up the night sky as the ship sank, blocking the fjord and delaying the German advance. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The delay allowed the royal family and government to escape, preserving Norway's sovereignty, even in exile. By late June, the campaign was over. The Allies, stretched thin by the German invasion of France, withdrew their forces. Norway fell under Nazi occupation. But the story didn't end there. Resistance grew in the shadows. Groups like the Milorg waged a guerrilla war, sabotaging German operations and gathering intelligence for the Allies. Norwegian fishing boats, part of the famed Shetland bus, ferried supplies and resistance fighters across the treacherous North Sea. Every act of defiance, no matter how small, became a reminder that Norway's spirit had not been broken. The Norwegian campaign was a story of courage and sacrifice, of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. It was a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, resistance is never futile. And though Norway spent 5 long years under occupation, its people never stopped fighting for their freedom, for their land, for their future.